Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're shooting high-end personal branding photography. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this week's interview of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am your host, Raymond Hatfield. Happy to be here today because today's episode, I know, is going to be a game changer for so many of you. Today, I chat with Wendy Yalom, who was a wedding photographer who, after discovering personal branding photography, which allowed her to travel the world and fulfill herself creatively and personally, decided to pursue personal branding photography. So we have a great chat and I cannot wait to share it with you. But before we get into today's interview, I have some exciting news for you all. And if you have ever thought about becoming a premium member and learning how to make money with your camera, now just might be the right time for you to join. Starting September 1st, I'll be making some updates to the premium membership to better serve you and your growing photography business for wherever you're at. So why would now be the right time to join? Well, currently, the premium membership has just one option. It's $10 a month, which allows you to get access to the full premium podcast interviews, where professional photographers share their best tips on how to make money with their camera, delivered straight to your phone each week. You also get access to the premium members only Facebook group, where you can get support from me and interact with others who are focused on growing their photography business. And on top of that, you also get monthly business training virtual workshops. Yeah, in fact, this month's business training is how to create a one-page photography business plan. Now, starting September 1st, the $10 a month starter plan will get you access to the weekly full premium podcast interviews. But the price will go up to $20 if you want to grow your photography business and get the full premium podcast interviews with access and support from the Facebook group and the monthly virtual business workshops. Which means if you become a premium member today and sign up before September 1st, then you will get access to the premium member Facebook group and the monthly business trainings locked in at just $10 a month for the life of your membership. So join today, locking in your $10 a month price. Head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Click the premium membership button at the top of the page. So what are you going to learn when you become a premium member? Well, aside from the create your own one-page photography business plan, which you're going to get access to right away when you sign up, in this interview, premium members are going to learn why Wendy wasn't worried about alienating potential clients when niching down to just boss babes for her personal branding photography, the 4 marketing misconceptions every new photographer makes and how to avoid them, and how to market your services without selling. So a ton to learn here that will directly help you in your ever-growing photography business. And for those of you who might still be on the fence, I have a little gift for you. And today, you are going to hear the full, uncut, premium podcast interview to get a taste of what you'll be receiving each and every week when you become a premium member. Again, become a premium member today to lock in your lower price before it goes up on September 1st by clicking the premium membership button at the top of the page at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. I hope to see you inside. Now with that, let's get into this interview with Wendy Yalom. Wendy, you actually went to school for fine art photography. So
Yes.
I love the beginnings of photography themselves. So before making that decision, which, making the decision to go to school specifically for something, that's a big decision in and of itself. But what was the relationship that you already had with photography to make that decision to pursue it even further?
Oh, I love this origin story. This is so fun. So my grandfather, we're going to go way back to like 1920, pre-1920 actually, when my grandfather, who in high school built a darkroom in his house so he could take photos and print photos. Like that's how he was such an innovator, right? In the field of photography. And so my mom's whole childhood was captured, which is rare because my mom was born in the 30s. And every year my grandpa would like set up these kind of like, you know, Vogue style family photo shoots. He was a chemical engineer. So this was, and super creative in so many ways. And so I had all of these photos as a young child that I got to see. And so by the time my mom's generation started having their kids, photography was such a huge part of our family's conversation dialogue. My mom went to art school. She was a painter, but she took photos. And so when I was pretty young, I got like an 810 camera, one of those little like, do you remember
Sideways,
those?
of course.
Yeah.
The tape. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the negatives were like half an inch by an inch. I mean, they were so tiny, which is perfect for like an 8-year-old, you know? And then when I got into high school, my mom gave me her Nikon, it was a Nikon FG, and I can't remember what the lens was. It was probably like a 50 or something, a fixed 50. And I just really loved photography. Like I was the friend, and this is, you know, film days. So there weren't as many people into photography as there are now. It wasn't as accessible because you needed to be able to buy film and then process the film. And you needed to invest pretty well in a camera to have a nice one. And so when I was 20 years old, I worked at the summer camp in Yosemite, and I just took photos. I was the friend photographer. I captured everything. I was so into it. And 2 of my friends were getting married that following year and asked me to be their photographer. And I thought that would be really fun. I didn't have any idea that it was important. So it was really easy to say yes to, because I hadn't even been to, I think, a wedding as an adult. And it really lit me up about the idea that I could have a career, I could make money with a camera, doing work that was really fun and meaningful for me. So that is what inspired me to go back to school and get a degree in photography. I was 20. I'd been in college for a couple of years. I was like art, psychology, whatever, early childhood education, environmental studies. You know, I tested all the fields and nothing clicked. So I was taking a year off. And I had that experience, and it was just so obvious to me that like that was what I wanted to study. And so I went back to school, and it was, again, film days. So, you know, I got to learn how to work in a dark room and wear a Discman.
Was that experience specifically that you're referencing right there that pushed you to go to art school, the shooting of those weddings?
Exactly.
Yeah. First of all, was that in Yosemite? Was that wedding in Yosemite?
No, that wedding was not in Yosemite. But actually, I think the second wedding I ever shot was in Yosemite. That wedding was in San Francisco at this super elegant location. And I went out and bought a flash that day. I had never used a flash before. I went out and bought a flash. I stopped at Safeway and bought a 5-pack of film. And the photos were not good at all. Like, I'm so sorry, but fortunately, I wasn't self-conscious about it. You know, it actually inspired me to go on. So.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great story. That is such a great story. You know, do you still have those photos of that wedding in Yosemite? Because like now that's such a thing. You know, you could be like the first. You know, put your blog posts out there in the world and just stake your claim there. That'd be awesome.
Right. Yes.
I really want to know about the transition that you had going from that little, I don't even know what kind of camera they're called. I think it's like 110. Is 110?
Oh, 110. That's it. 110.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to know about that transition going from, because essentially those cameras they're just automatic. It's just the press of a button and then you get your photos.
Yeah.
And then switching to the Nikon 35mm format, because this is more of a professional format where you're in control of, you know, your aperture, your ISO, and your shutter speed. What was that learning curve like for you there in the beginning? Was that difficult?
God, I'm so glad you're asking. I mean, this was in high school, and I can't remember. I mean, I'm imagining that I don't even remember, honestly. I mean, I must have learned something about, because I think this was before there was any kind of program mode on these cameras, right? Like once I started shooting professionally, you had the camera that you could just set to like autopilot. I don't remember if that FG had that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't quite remember that transition, but I think the bigger, like, yeah, I can't quite remember that transition.
What about any sort of like challenges that you faced? Do you remember being
Yeah.
frustrated with the camera at all?
Well, I don't remember being frustrated with the camera then, but I do remember the transition from digital film to digital and that frustration. And
Really? How
like
so?
that, oh God, it was so stressful because, it was 2005, so digital technology was not that great,
Hmm.
but it had the benefit of you not having to bring, 40 rolls of film and
Yeah.
literally, I would have an assistant with me at every wedding who I just passed my cameras to change the film. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's what you had to do, right? You got 36 frames, imagine, and I had to have two camera bodies that I was constantly using, one black and white, one color. And so you would think the transition to digital would be just so pleasurable, but the technology was not that great. So there was a couple of things that happened. One is it would take a long time to record images sometimes. So you would be sometimes waiting like 10 seconds for the file to load before you could load another file. And then
Wow.
when you got, oh man, and then like it also, the technology to download cards was way more stressful because they would take forever, and sometimes they'd glitch, you'd lose images. I remember one of the first weddings I shot digitally, just feeling so frustrated, and so like taking the card out and trying to put it back in, not realizing that like by pulling the card out you basically are erasing it. And then all of us, I think, who are digital photographers have had the experience at least once of having to take a card into a data, and now you just have that app right on your computer that's like a data, what's it called,
Like to
recovery.
scan recovery, yeah.
Yes. But back then it was like there weren't that many, so you had to mail it in, and like, oh God, it was so stressful. Oh my God. And of course, eventually the benefit, and also the quality was still not nearly as sharp as film. And people were so used to seeing film that when they saw digital images, they looked cheap. Like they
Mm.
looked different than what we registered as photographs. And so it was hard to reconcile, I think, for people that like that transition. But now we're all so used to seeing digital images that actually seeing film images, they look a little bit off and grainy. It's
Isn't that weird?
interesting. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so weird how the tables turn like that in such, I mean, relatively a short period of time, especially throughout, like when you think about the history of photography, Uh, one thing that I'm always curious about, though, is now I went to film school because I wanted to do cinematography. You obviously went to a fine art school with a focus in photography. There's a lot of people, especially now with in this age of digital, who essentially learn everything that they can on YouTube and can be pretty successful, on their own in terms of the quality of images that they're able to produce. So I'm curious about your views on going to school for photography, kind of in today's world. What would you say to somebody if they asked you if you would recommend going to school for photography?
God, it's such a great question. I'm so happy you asked this question because I think a lot has changed since then. The first thing that's changed is it's not like we have come to recognize that like going to college does not necessarily equal, it's not like a step you have to take in order to have a successful career. And that I think has become obvious in the last 20 years. So I'm 46 now. So when I started college, it was like 1992. It was still, my parents' generation was like, you have to get an education. It was just assumed. Um, I think if somebody's thinking about it, the benefits of going to school are being a part of a community, having a dialogue with a group of people about your work, having mentors and teachers who've been there who can critique the work you do. It's really about having community and camaraderie. There was a thing that I didn't learn in school, and it may be because it was fine art, but I imagine even for fine art it would have been valuable, which is there's the whole business of photography that you miss. So if you want the experience of being a part of, if you want the college experience, go for it. It's like, why not? That said, it's completely unnecessary if you want to have a successful career. And if you do, what I recommend is focusing as much energy on the business of running a photography business as you do on the art of, which I think is what gets lost. Because I left school and I mentor photographers now, and a lot of them come to me and their images are beautiful. Like they've got the right quality of light, and like the framing is beautiful. It's like you can just tell that they're masterful at the skill, but they have no idea how to market or sell their businesses. And so I think that would be, if I was doing it over, I would probably focus, I would definitely want to find some kind of community experience because that's just pleasurable. But I think I would be way more disciplined about it being about both the art and the business of photography. That's what I think. What do you think? Having gone to school too.
I haven't gone to film school. It's pretty similar. You know, you don't really have to worry too much about the business side of things because you're kind of hired to be a worker on set essentially. But film is definitely an industry in which you can just show up one day and learn everything that you can on set and be very proficient at it. So it's kind of different. It's very interesting though, you know, talking about the business side of photography because there is so much to it. And here within photography, I feel like there's as many different styles of business as there are genres of photography. So it can be hard to really get very specific information on something, you know, that you're really looking to get into. But you actually, you know, as you said, you've been doing this for a long time. And I want to mention here, because this is a huge accomplishment, that you were voted best wedding photographer in San Francisco in 2011.
Well,
is that correct?
By this local newspaper. So yeah, which was awesome.
So yes.
Not complaining, yes.
That's huge because San Francisco is one of like the biggest wedding markets in the world. So again, incredible accomplishment. But
thank you.
Today we're talking about branding photography. That's where this is all coming from. So I want to know, after receiving some sort of an award like that, the accomplishment, the notoriety, what made you think, you know what, I'm going to give all this up and I'm going to do something entirely different?
I love that you're saying this because I think this is such a, I get photographers who I mentor who come to me who are like, I want to transition out of wedding photography, and that's why I've chosen personal brand photography. And for me, it actually wasn't a decision to leave wedding photography. What happened for me was I loved wedding photography. I had to learn the business of photography, and I had to fall in love with the business of photography. I always loved the art, but it wasn't until maybe about, I don't know, like 8 or 10 years into my career as a wedding photographer that I realized I actually needed to build a business. It wasn't like I wasn't just going to be sustained by great connections with people and, you know, and taking great photos. Like the world was changing, like the internet, people were going to the internet to find photographers. Like, it's always such an old age. People were discovered the internet, but it was like the times were changing. So I had to build the business, and I really fell in love with the business. And I loved my work as a wedding photographer. I loved, working with couples and understanding like how to talk about wedding photography as more than just like, I'm going to take pictures of your wedding, and how to package that and market it. It was really fun for me. And I started as a wedding photographer when I was in my early 20s, when a lot of my friends were getting married, people in my community were getting married, I was getting married. It was like, it's sort of what people were doing. So it was really easy to be a part of that community. Then in about 2012, I had this community of friends who were coaches and spiritual entrepreneurs, and people were starting to use the internet to market their services, and they were offering virtual services. And so I started to have relationships with people who had a need for a different kind of photography. And I had girlfriends come to me and ask for portraits that were more authentic was the word they used. Like they wanted something other than the realtor photo, which is what traditionally had been a headshot before that, you know? They wanted people to see these photos and feel like they were having like a moment with the person in them versus like, she looked like, you know, like she looks tense and nervous, but that's okay. She'll help me buy my house. You know, she looks pretty, whatever. So I started serving that community and discovering more and more of a need for it. And at that time, I had a pretty full schedule of wedding photography, but as you know, and all of us know, it's like weddings, you know, even a full schedule is like 30 days a year, right? Because it's like they happen on the weekends. There's sometimes the year you don't. work.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think at the end it was probably like between 30, 35 a year, which is like a good solid business. And I had time to do this other work. And so I started incorporating that in during the weeks. And then, within a couple of years, I started getting to travel to do that work. And it became this, I just noticed myself feeling more excited when I would get an inquiry about brand photography than when I get an inquiry about wedding photography. And so eventually the wedding inquiries would come and I'd be like, well, what's the location? Oh, well, what's their budget? You know, it was less about like, oh my God, how cool and exciting that this couple wants to hire me. And so the transition just happened naturally when I was getting enough of the other work, and that wedding photography it was less of a pull. So now I'm 100% brand photography and then mentorship. And that's been for the last, since 2015, I transitioned totally out of doing weddings.
So that's a relatively fast transition from 2012 to 2015. I mean, it's hard for many photographers who are working like a 9 to 5 to go full time in that amount of time. So to be able to completely change who you are and what it is that you do, and then do it successfully, to be able to obviously support yourself and sustain your business, that's a huge leap. That's a huge leap. So when it comes to branding photography, though, you know, you said that it's different than just like a regular portrait session. You don't just want, you know, the just the smile and looking straight at the camera. You really want to feel some emotion. But when you're there and you're shooting, how do you interact with your subject differently from a portrait session, just a traditional portrait session, as you would here in a personal branding session?
It's such a good question. My first thought was like inappropriately, because I feel like I swear a lot, but that's not the main way I interact. You know, it's probably similar. And my way when I rarely did more of the traditional portraits, but I certainly was occasionally, especially like I can remember a couple of instances where one of the either the bride or the groom then asked me to come into their business after that I had worked with, and that they needed headshots. And like, so I occasionally did that more classic headshot, kind of like Gustavo, who's the one who introduced us, does. He does like more of that kind of classic corporate headshot, right? I interacted pretty similarly. Like I wanted to put the person at ease. I wanted them to feel relaxed. I wanted them to feel like I wanted to get them out of the fear thoughts that a lot of us have when we're being photographed, or the distraction or the insecurity thoughts, and just get them to be relaxed and happy. And so in probably some ways it was similar. But the difference is that when we're talking about a more classic, like corporate headshot, we want to see, there's similarity, like when I'm thinking about personal brand photography, really we're getting at like, what is it we want the viewer to feel about this person? What do we want to imagine are the qualities that this person embodies? You know, is it confident? Like when I think about a classic corporate portrait, it'd be more like confidence, like ability, capability, like strength, you know, like those are more of the, like, I got this, trustability, right? What I want, a lot of my clients are selling is an experience versus a practical thing. So like I work with a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs who are, you know, 8-time over New York Times bestselling authors, and they write books for how to be in the present moment, right? And that's not like a physical thing we can show them doing. And so I want them in those photos to embody the energy that they're essentially selling their clients. So we want to create photos where they look present, they look connected, we can feel it. You know, all of us, I think, have seen those photos and have had photos probably of ourselves where we look at it and we can see we're like smiling, but we aren't genuinely happy. Yes. You know, it's like that. And so and people are really smart. Like they know that. And so I want my clients' photos for when the viewer sees them, they get that in that moment, that client's actually having the experience that they're exhibiting on their face, whether it's joy or like this client I just mentioned, like presence and peace, or success, with, you know, whatever that is, confidence. So that's health. I work with a lot of health coaches, like vitality and health. So I think that getting back to your question, which is how do I interact? I think that there's a few things. One is I really want to create like a visual experience in addition to actually the energy they feel, meaning like where we are, what they're physically doing in the photos, all those things that match what it is that experience is. And then I want them to actually feel it. So I'll talk to them in a way about the work they offer, or I'll try and inspire in them, like just to use that coach that I just mentioned, or the author who's a spiritual teacher. It's like I'll have her close her eyes and actually drop in and meditate for a few minutes, so that way when the moment comes where we're taking the photos, like she's actually feeling that experience. So that's really it's like, how do you match the moment that we're taking the photo to the moment to the experience we want the clients to imagine working with that person creates.
Yeah. So how do you, this is really interesting. This is really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, before a wedding, I don't typically do a lot of research on my couples. I don't, I don't want to say that I don't, feel for their hopes and dreams or whatever. I try to learn as much as I can about them to try to kind of tailor their wedding. But typically that happens like during the engagement session. But for something so personal, for something where your clients are going to be using these photos to promote themselves and put essentially them best selves out into the world, to be that first interaction, I suppose, that a stranger may have with them. How do you ensure that you choose the right feeling or vibe that these photos need to have?
I love that you talked about this. And the first thing is it's important for me that there's a real sense of, the word that's coming to mind is intimacy with the client right off the bat, that they feel really confident in opening up to me about what they actually want. Mm-hmm. So that's that. We start there, even on the sales call. Like I want to get to that level of connection with them, so that they feel safe sharing with me something that they might be feeling nervous about, or something they really want but feel embarrassed about, or or feel like they shouldn't have, whatever it is. And then we have an hour-long planning call. In that hour-long planning call, I lead them through a series of questions that gets in at their vision and helps me understand what it is that they're wanting their clients to experience, what it is that they're wanting them to pay them for, essentially. And so we have an hour-long call that really gets in at that piece. And during that call, I think of a photo shoot day as having a series of stories that we're going to tell with the camera. And each story essentially is like a different location, a different setup, a different outfit. It's like a different moment in my client's life, right? About in their work life. And so on that call, we want to come up with a series of different stories that we get to tell. So, is like, if we're working with a health coach, is it like, are we in a kitchen? And then are we like, am I out somewhere beautiful where they're running? If I'm working with, or is it like a McDonald's because they want to tell about like, who knows? Like, we just kind of get it. Like, what are the different moments that we would want a potential client of theirs to step into the real life with them in? And so that's really fun. And then it's cool for me because as much as I am a creative, I also love planning. Like, I am such a organizer and planner. So then from that call, I go through and get to pick the different locations we're going to have, where we're going to shoot, the kind, what they're going to be doing in each of those locations. Like, I actually collaborate with them on what they're wearing. So I see what they're wearing and make recommendations. And so I basically take their dream or their vision and make it into a reality.
That's a lot. That's a lot that you have to do in order to make sure that obviously the photos that they want, that they're going to get, and get it without a hitch. That's incredible. Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, that right there, I think, speaks alone to the value of what personal brand photography is versus, a portrait session. Because if somebody tells me that they're a real estate agent, I know what that photo is going to look like. If somebody tells me that they are a spiritual health coach or something, there's a lot more room in there, I think, to play with. And I don't know why, but it's great that you're able to kind of dig in and really make these sessions personal to who they are and not just what they are, if that makes sense. I really like that.
Totally. 100%. And even like a spiritual health coach, it's like, I mean, there are as many definitions for that as there are spiritual health coach. You know, it's like one could advocate like meditation and, you know, sitting in silence and doing yoga and, you know, eating vegan and living in a cave, you know, and one could be like, go, you know, all in like the Ritz and you should dance 100 hours a week and, you know, like indulge in all of your desires. And so it's like, it's so cool because you do have to investigate, like, what does the word elegant mean to you? You know, what does the word confident look like in your imagination? We have so many words that we use that we think we just assume your interpretation and my interpretation of elegant would be the same, or spiritual would be the same. And beautiful, even, like, you know, it's so personal. So it's really cool to investigate and get into what it is that, how they use those, how they interpret those words.
Of course, of course. I mean, there's 7 billion people on Earth, so we all kind of experience all these things differently. That's awesome. That's awesome. My next question here is that you kind of touched on this earlier, which is that, you know, you had a lot of friends who were kind of in this space, a lot of women friends who were in this space of helping, and they were authors and they were coaches. So now today, if somebody were to go to your website, they would see that that's pretty much exclusively what you shoot. You've niched down a ton. Not only is personal branding photography not for everybody, but you've decided to exclude a lot more people who could potentially use personal brand photography and focusing only in on, you know, boss ladies, essentially, right? The powerful women who are coaches, entrepreneurs, speakers. Where did this? Well, I guess I know where this idea came from. It was from your close personal connections. But when you decided to go all in on this idea, were you worried that maybe you were being too specific and that you were going to alienate a lot of people?
I love that you're asking this, because here's what I think is so, I honestly, every business coach who has someone who's just starting their business create like a niche or an avatar, like I want them to throw out every one of those exercises, honestly, because I don't think you can know when you start out who you're going to serve. Mm-hmm. What I think is and this is what happened for me, and this is what I've seen be successful across the board, is I was genuinely sharing what lit me up about this, why I was excited, the kind of work I wanted to do, the kind of work I wanted to share. And a certain kind of person was attracted to working with me. And the cool thing about this was not only did it let me just be myself in my marketing, what it did was it really inspired and made the people who resonated with my message passionate about working with me. So there was no lukewarm feelings. Like I was not, and when I market, like I'm not thinking like, okay, what's the lingo that I need to be using to attract this kind of client? It's like, I'm just saying what I want to say about the work I do. And that attracts that kind of client. I had this really good friend of mine, who's an executive coach, say to me, like, basically, if you are not repelling 75% of the people who come to you, like, you're not doing your job. And repelling might not be the right word, but you really the most full year for me is 100 clients a year. And that is like full guns. And so I only need to attract 100 people a year. So when you're trying to reach everybody, it's rare that you're going to get people who are passionate enough about you that they want to work with you. It's kind of like, well, her photos are nice, but her photos are nice too. It's like, so just coming back to that question about niching, it's like, I think what happened for me, and what I think is the most valuable for all of us who are starting this, is like, let your marketing, especially at the beginning, be about why you do this. Like, why are you a photographer? Like, nobody's marketing is going to be like, I got into photography because it was the easiest way to save for my retirement, you know? Like, you get into photography because you're passionate about something, about the work of photography, the art of photography. And so sharing that allows people to get to know you. And those people are the people who are your clients. And so I think the niching really was a matter of, it's not even like it's not like if somebody came to me, and I do sometimes get like, occasionally you'll get, just recently I worked with a man who's runs a VC, and he's focuses on food and hospitality, like totally different. Like, and it was super fun to work with him, and it had nothing to do with what I'm sharing on my website or in my marketing. But yeah, I think that's the thing, is like find a way to talk about the work you do, and why you love it, and the people who want that will, and like why it's uniquely valuable, and the people who are drawn to that, those become your niche.
Yeah.
Right.
So you said so much there that is just so interesting. I want to dive into all of it, but this all has to start from one place, right? And that one place is marketing, right?
Yes.
We all have to start with marketing. And with weddings, as you know, it's nonstop marketing because you very rarely ever have repeat clients. It is so incredibly difficult. And for most photographers, especially new photographers, it always feels like a total unknown, right? We don't know if it's working. We don't know how to, quantify whether or not it's good or if it's bad. But as somebody who's been successfully attracting clients for 20 years now, and as a coach to other personal brand photographers, I want to know from you, what do you think the secret is, and where do you see maybe your students or other new photographers getting marketing just all wrong?
Oh, I'm so happy. This is like one of my favorite questions, especially these days. I think the most important thing is your career is a long game. As long as you are in business, you will be marketing. So I think the most important thing to recognize is like you have to build a relationship to marketing that is pleasurable, that you can do consistently, that like you and I both know, like the only direction our businesses would coast if we stopped is down, right? Like we are going to be marketing until we close shop, right? And that's cool, because what that means is it takes the pressure off everything you put out into the world having to be like the thing. Mm-hmm. So number one, it's a long game. Your marketing is a long game. Number two, so find something that you can do. Not necessarily like, it's not necessarily always fun. Like I don't always sit down to a day of marketing and think like, great. Like some days I'm like, I just don't want to do this, but it's like something, but once I put my mind to it, it's something I can do without having, with relative ease, So that's the first thing. And then I think that the thing that that is like the thing that I've recently been so aware of it. In fact, I just led this marketing challenge in my Facebook group because I noticed everybody was doing this, is people think that marketing is selling. Mm-hmm. And what I mean when I say that is it's like people think that they have to post about something that they're offering, or they'll only post when they're trying to get clients. And the marketing is actually building a long-term relationship with people who may not hire you for 5, 10, 15 years, right? It's like every time I'm going to talk about New Balance, because I buy New Balance sneakers for the last 10 years, pretty much exclusively, not because I know New Balance is necessarily the best sneaker, but like I have become like a repeat client of theirs. And like whenever I see a New Balance ad, it's never like buy this new sneaker. It's like building some kind of relationship and connection with me to that company. I don't know why, but it's something about that. And so one of the things that I think is so important right off the bat, and there's so many things that I just actually did. I love that you're asking this, because I can send you a link. I just did a whole video about the 4 marketing misconceptions that hold photographers back. So this is very perfect. Cool. There's these beliefs that like everything that is of value has been said, like, or it's that they don't know like the right words to use. God, what are the other two? Like there's some kind of special marketing lingo. The other one is they're pestering or annoying. Like I hear this a lot. Like I don't want to bug people. And I love that one, especially because the truth is like most people are not bugs. Like we have an onslaught of information. Like when I see someone's Instagram post that I'm not interested in, I ignore it. I don't think, God, why is this woman posting again? It's like it's like the brain doesn't work that way. But how the brain does work is, oh, I noticed her post. I'm not interested in this now, but I'm remembering her. Oh, I noticed her post. I'm not interested in this now, but I'm remembering her. Oh, I noticed her post. Actually, I need a photographer. Right. Who is that person that I've been following? And so much of this is about creating relationship. So it's those three things. And then the fourth one is just consistency. It's like finding that time every week where you decide you're going to do one post or one email, and that they aren't. The most important thing I want to come back to is that, like, you're not selling your services. You're creating a relationship with your potential client about the work you do, about the kind of clients you serve, information and wisdom you have about what's important when it comes to being photographed, all of those things. So yeah, that's my marketing soapbox.
That's perfect. And that you touched upon something there that I know that so many people are worried about, obviously, is the concern that they're selling. But now if
Yes.
you tell somebody, in my head, when you're like, no, don't use marketing to sell, in my head I'm thinking, is the goal now, will it be too passive in the information that I put out, or how do I get them to reach out to me to complete my services?
Great question. And what I mean by that is that what I see a lot of photographers do is, like, all they do is try and get people to reach out. And that's, we just don't as humans respond to that. Like, hire me, you should hire me. Here's why you should hire me. It's like, to me, that immediately gives me the perspective that, like, somehow this person is needing me to hire them, and it's coming more from a place of desperation. That's how it feels. So what I mean when I say what I think is important is that if you're marketing often and consistently, you're actually building relationship. You're dropping, like, tons. Every time I market, it's like I'm talking about the work I do. I'm talking about the clients I serve. I'm talking about why I love this work. I'm talking about how cool and amazing it is to see my work out in the world. I'm showing people, like, teaching them, like, what they need to do to have a great photo shoot. So the whole time that they're reading this, they're completely aware of the fact that I'm a photographer who has services, and they're building a relationship and rapport with me. It's kind of the same as, like, if you're dating someone at the beginning and right off the bat, they're trying to convince you why you should be in a long-term relationship with them, versus you are just like, you're building connection, you're building rapport, you're building credibility, you're building trustability. Like, and then every once in a while, probably, like, 10% of the time that we're marketing, we'll have a direct call to action. But the call to action is not the most important thing in that post. The call to action is, by the way, we're booking now. Get in touch if you're curious. Hey, listen, like, we've just launched this thing. I want you. When I launch the mentorship stuff, it comes in the context of, like, 2 or 3 months of me just sharing with people why, like, what's important to know as a photographer. And then 3 or 4 months in, we'll be like, hey, we're opening up a masterclass. So you've already built this relationship and rapport. And the same is true for photography. Like, I had a recent client hire me who had a sales call with me 5 years ago, and at the end of that call said to me, and which I hear sometimes from clients, I've got you on my vision board. I can't afford it right now, but I'm holding this for the future. And what I didn't need to do during that call was try and bend my services or my prices to fit her needs, because I knew eventually, if she was ready, we'd have a relationship that would have been built over those years. She just booked a shoot, so we're photographing. We have a shoot in Jackson Hole next month, and it's like, that's so cool. And part of that is because we've stayed connected through my marketing. She was not, if she every time saw my name come up on Facebook or Instagram and it was like a plea to work with me, she probably would have tuned it out. Like, who really wants to stay connected to that? And there's also so many people who don't need your services today, but may be interested and curious to read what you have to say, who 2 months, 3 months, 10 months, 2 years down the line does need a photographer and has created this relationship with you. And so, again, like, that those kind of emails that are more about selling the services would have completely turned them off. Like, they would have tuned that out. Yeah. I'm so passionate about this, you can tell.
Well, I think you did it. I've never heard anybody really explain the difference between marketing and selling, I guess, so effectively. And I mean, you really just made a lot of photographers take a deep breath and think to themselves, "Oh, I think I got this. I think that I can do this right here." Because suddenly it's not as hard. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great tip. That's a great.
Totally. And just a quick thing for your photographers, which is like, it's also awkward before it's elegant. So like, I know it's like, it could be a relief, but it also could be like, well, what do I share about if I'm not sharing about my services? It's like, just play with what you're curious to share about. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
Oh yes,
That, yeah. Are you familiar with it?
I am. Yes.
It's such a cool place to go if you're starting out, because he gives a framework for talking about what you do. That's not just like, I have a camera and I could come take photos of you. And so watching that is cool, because then you can start playing with talking about why you do this, like why you're into photography. And I think then, know that like those photographers who are listening, who maybe have like are also now paralyzed with fear because they don't know what to talk about, like just play with it, like experiment.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And I know that there's going to be a lot of experimenting because, again, I mean, everybody's looking for, if we know that we have to market forever, essentially, why not try to
Yes.
make it not only easy, but fun, I suppose, right? Make it a little easier on us. So that's great. That's great. When
Yes.
it comes back to the personal branding sessions, though, I'm always curious
Yeah.
about this. I love this question because, as I said earlier, there's so many people on Earth, and everybody's answer is different. For you, what is your goal every time for each personal branding session? Like, what do you have to capture? No matter how it goes. I mean, it could be a rock star moment, or it could be a total, failure of a shoot. But what's the one thing that you know that you have to capture in order to deliver what your client needs?
Yeah. God, what a great question. Um, I need to, first of all, like one of the things I love about this work is that it forces me to be present. Like you can't dial in one of these days, because if you do, you're not actually feeling what the client's feeling. So, it's starting with that conversation I have with them where I really understand what it is they're trying to communicate, and understanding their needs, that planning call. And then on the day of, it's trusting my creative instincts over the voice in my head that's telling me like what I should do.
Wow. I'm going to write that down. That was good.
Yeah.
Trusting my creative instincts. Trusting my creative instincts. I think that's it. I think that's essentially what all photographers are looking for.
Yes.
I had a discussion with somebody the other day who was saying like they just booked their first paid shoot and they were so excited, and they were like they were talking about how they're going to go to Pinterest to find all these poses and ideas for the shoot. And I asked, I said, well, why did they reach out to you in the first place? And he said, oh, well, they liked my work. And I thought to myself, so what are you doing? Going to look for other people's work to to try to replicate? If they already like what it is that you do, keep
Yes.
going with that. 100%. 100%.
Oh God, and I love that we're
Great.
talking about this, because it's actually another thing I see photographers do, which is they want to defer to the client for permission. Like they want to
Right.
defer to the client's lead, but the clients, because I noticed this. It's like they're like continuously trying to prove to the client that that prove their worth. They're continuously trying to prove their worth to the client. The minute the client books you and pays you, the client has said you are worth it. Like, just know that. Like, they are basically saying, like, I'm investing in you to handle this, and I'm trusting you to be the lead. And so it's having that, and especially when you work with some of the clients who I work with who are running like multiple 7-figure businesses, like they are used to being like the one in charge, that it is such a relief to them to have someone come in who's going to do the job for them, because they're not brand photographers.
Yeah.
And they don't have the creative instinct I have. They don't have the understanding of light. They don't know why we would choose that random back alley over like, the marina or whatever, like, it's like, and so really it's like that trusting the creative impulse
Yeah, that's it. That's it right there. That's what the title
Yeah.
of this interview is going to be called now. Trusting the creative impulse. That's perfect.
Awesome.
I know that we don't have much more time, so I want to ask you, Wendy, because you've been very gracious with your time, and I really do appreciate you sharing. You've really been an open book today, which has been wonderful. But in this time, there's no way that we can cover all of
Yeah.
what goes into personal branding photography and photography in general. So is there anything that maybe I didn't ask you today that you just want to make sure that those listening know about personal branding photography?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's two things. One is, we didn't check in about this before, but I'm assuming it's okay. I do have a free Facebook group that I would love to have people join. So in there, I offer videos and I talk about video, I share a lot of wisdom and insight. So if people want to join that, is this okay that I'm sharing this? I'm
Yeah, yeah,
hoping
yeah, yeah.
since
Yes,
we're
please,
recording is
yes.
okay. So we can maybe offer a link to that. That's a great place. And I speak specifically to the art and business of personal brand photography in there and answer all kinds of questions. So that's a great place to get more. I think what I would leave your client, what I would want to leave your folks with is just like a couple of things. One is this field of personal brand photography is like the field that is growing and continues to grow. It is the personal brand photographers who are behind every great Instagram ad campaign, or not even when I say ad campaign, what I really mean is influencer, page. Like we are turning more and more, and especially with COVID, it's like more and more is becoming virtual. And so the work that we get to do is so valuable because in today's world, we've come to this place where it's rare for us to be in real life with the people who we're working with.
Yes.
And so as photographers, we get to be that bridge between these people who are serving the world and all of their clients. It's a very cool place to be in. And there's a lot of opportunity for it, both professionally and just on a personal level, to create those visions. I think when I think about the difference between this and any of the other fields, there is so much opportunity for creativity doing brand photography, because you really get to take this, like you and I've talked so much about in this call, this sort of this amorphous idea of what it means to be confident or look powerful or all these things, and like bring it into real life. It's like a little bit of a magician's thing. And so I would just encourage anybody who's considering it to go for it, to test it, to try it, to join the group and learn more if you want to. And then the other thing, just for all of the photographers who are not necessarily in personal branding, it's like, I can't emphasize enough the importance of finding joy in running a business. Like not only learning, but discovering that it can be joyful. Like if you can bring the same kind of creativity and joy and just pride to the business you're running that you bring to the photography you create, like you got it.
You got it. One last thing before I let you go, and that is for those who are looking to get started today, right? If they're thinking, I'm all in on this, who should they reach out to first to dip your toes in the water and maybe give them their own personal branding session?
Yes, great question. They should look at the people in their community and see people who they think could use this, and just reach out and just offer this. Like say, like, here's what I'm doing. Here's why I think you'd be a great fit. I am a huge fan, if you're dipping your toes into it, to reach out to 2 or 3 different people who you just think it was. Let go of it trying to be, don't have it be like, oh, if I reach out to this one, she's pretty influential and maybe she'll recommend me friends. Like, no, just people who you think this would serve, and the kind of people who you want to spend your time with. Now, like at this point in my career, like I said, I work about 100 days a year. And so that means 100 days of the year, I'm spending all day with people, with my clients. And so it's like, find people who that's actually a joy. It's like, I would choose to spend the day with these people if they were paying me or not. They are amazing human beings. And so it's like, find people that you're actually drawn to spending time with. That's my recommendation is start there, and have it just give yourself full permission to trust your creative instincts, both in what you're photographing, but also in how you're creating the shoot. and the day.
What a great interview today with Wendy. I think my biggest takeaway from all of this is just that, even though Wendy loved weddings, and not only did she love weddings, but she was at the top of her game, she still had the courage to switch paths and go in a different direction. Sometimes we feel like when we have success, well, we just have to continue going with that one thing. But all that work, building that wedding business, getting to the top, she decided to completely start over because she knew that with personal branding photography, she was going to feel, as I said earlier, more fulfilled. And this is why it is so important to continue to try new things, continue to shoot in new styles and do something different, because you never know. You just might find your calling. So that is it for this week's episode. That is it for this week. Until next week, I want you to make do. I want you to make more. I want you to do more. And I want you to make do with what you got, because I promise you, it's better than you think. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.